everyone. Thank you for coming. I think this is my favorite town that I have no reason to ever move to, which is saying a lot for me because I love to move. So I'm so happy to be in Chicago. And it's great to see you, Michael.
Nice to see
meet you in person.
Yeah, likewise.
I know you were on my podcast a couple of weeks ago, so
that's what gave me the big boost.
Excited, exactly. That'll put anyone over the top. So it's great to continue the conversation. So we should say we're going to talk for about 35 minutes, and then we wanted to make sure there was enough time for audience questions. So we'll stop at that time and then open it up to you guys. And yeah, it's too bad we only have 35 minutes. I know you were just on Joe Rogan for 3 hours.
Yes, that was a short one.
So yeah. So this is gonna be easy. Well, I guess I thought we would just open this conversation by talking about a story that's right in front of us. So Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, was just brutally attacked. Really horrifying story by somebody who is now being talked about as both a QAnon far-right conspiracy theorist and a far-left other kind of conspiracy theorist. Right.
Right.
Yeah. So, and obviously this has become totally polarized. So we have the people on the left saying this is what happens when the far-right furthers ridiculous, dangerous theories, and we have people on the right saying, well, this not only is a person following leftist conspiracy theories, but a mentally ill homeless person living in San Francisco, and therefore, what did you expect? So, what are we to make of this?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, it's too soon to tell on that one probably, but the moment I saw his quote, where's Nancy? Oh, well, that's what the guys were asking on the insurrectionist January 6th day, so that sounds like he's one of those guys. It's possible it could be both. It could be mentally ill and a QAnon. Those are not mutually exclusive. In fact, there may be some relationship there. So to what extent do people believe QAnon or Pizzagate? Just take the most crazy conspiracy theory I've ever heard, that Hillary Clinton and Beyonce and Tom Hanks and others are running a secret satanic pedophile ring out of a pizzeria. I mean, who could possibly believe that, right? But one guy did, Edgar Welch. He went there with his gun to break it up, which is kind of what you would do if there was an actual crime being committed and no one was doing anything about it. And this is what he said on his video. He made a video in the 3.5-hour drive from his house to the pizza place. I'm going in there to his daughters, leaving this message to his daughters. I'm going in there to break up this crime. If this was happening to you, I would want somebody to do something about it. So he believed it. Does anyone in the top GOP really believe those kinds of things? I don't think so. Did anyone in the top of the GOP really believe the 2020 election was rigged? I don't think so. I think they kind of went along with it. So in my book, I kind of outline different kinds of conspiracism. This kind of proxy conspiracism where the specific conspiracy is a proxy or a stand-in for something else, such that even if I took you to the pizza place and said, look, there's no basement here, much less a pedophile ring, it's not like you're going to go, oh, I don't think I'll vote for Hillary in that case. It's like you're never going to vote for Hillary, right? So this is kind of like the kind of thing Democrats would do even if they didn't do this one. There was something about the Clinton body count in the 90s, and wasn't Bill on that plane with Epstein to that island where they had a trafficking pedophile ring going? Yeah. So they kind of conflate things such that the specifics are not as important as the deeper concern, which drives much of conspiracism. Somewhere, somebody behind closed doors that has a lot of power that I don't have is up to no good.
Yeah, so just so we get a sense of how many people believe conspiracy theories, although maybe it won't come as a surprise to people in this audience, I'd be curious how many people in this audience are like conspiracy junkies, or if you just happen to wander in here. But I want to read off a couple of, I want to read off a little data. So this comes from political scientists Joseph Uczynski and Joseph Parent. And so they conducted a content analysis of over 100,000 letters sent to the New York Times over the course of 121 years. All right, and they compiled this into an edited volume called Conspiracy Theories and the People Who Believe Them. So we're just going to run down this some statistics here. About a third of Americans believe the birther conspiracy theory that Obama is a foreigner. Yeah. Okay, about as many believe that 9/11 was an inside job by the Bush administration. So a third. Okay, this one, about 10%, I bet you haven't thought of this one lately. So about 10% of Americans think that the chemtrail conspiracy theory is, quote, completely true, and another 30% think it is somewhat true. That means that over 100 million Americans think that the government and airlines are conspiring to poison or drug U.S. citizens by spraying chemicals from airliners. Aren't you glad to be reminded of that? Now this is something more new to think about. 4% of people believe that shape-shifting reptiles are secretly running the world. I think that sounds plausible, actually.
It would explain a lot in politics of what's going on.
Yeah, all right.
Yes.
9% believe that the government adds fluoride to water, not to fight tooth decay, which it does, but in order to control the lives of citizens. All right. 21% believe that an alien spaceship crashed in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, and that the government is hiding the ship and aliens in a secret warehouse, and that we back-engineered computer technology from them. And then, of course, since 1963, more than half of all Americans believe that more than one person was responsible for the assassination of John F. Kennedy, with a high of 81% in the 1970s and a low of 61% in the 2010s. Okay, so that's insane.
So this is interesting because this is self-report data, always a limitation of social science research, and that people are just ticking a box. You know, what are they really thinking? Of course, we don't know. There is a consistency where people that tick the box for one conspiracy theory tend to tick the box for a bunch of them. Same thing with paranormal beliefs, supernatural beliefs. If you believe in UFOs, you also probably believe in the paranormal, supernatural, so on. So it's not clear what the data really means. I mean, shape-shifting aliens, you know, I think sometimes people are just ticking the box. And it may be tapping a deeper concern that I don't trust authorities of any kind. I don't trust government agencies, I don't trust corporations, and therefore any of these things could be true, right? Whether or not they really believe that that particular one is true, you know, is not clear. So the most famous study on this that I write about in the book by Karen Wood is, the title of this paper is called Dead and Alive. People that tick the box to agree that Princess Diana was murdered are also more likely to tick the box that she faked her death, you know, and she's still alive with, you know, Dodi Fayed and in Argentina with Elvis in Maryland or something. Right, well, she can't be both dead and alive. So the interpretation is that it's just kind of a more global distrust of whatever the authorities, the media, the mainstream media, the lamestream media, they are always lying to us, right? And you can always find a few examples. You know, the Kyle Rittenhouse case was, you know, misinterpreted and so on. And those left-wing media, they always get it wrong. Well, they got it wrong, you know, once on that particular time. Okay. But so people run with that, and so that's why you get those numbers like that. So you have to kind of look at the consistency underlying. There's something else that they're trying to tell us. People in power are up to no good. And so my theory of constructive conspiracism is that enough of those stories are true that it's kind of rational to be constructively paranoid, a little bit. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you, because sometimes they are, right? So I go through a bunch of those.
So what is the criteria for a conspiracy theory versus a cover-up, say?
Yeah, right. Okay, so a conspiracy is where two or more people are plotting in secret to gain an unfair, illegal, or immoral advantage over a third person or a different group. A conspiracy theory is a theory about that happening. Whether it's true or not is a separate question. And then a conspiracist is somebody who believes that the conspiracy theory is actually a true theory. So in a way, it's kind of a signal detection problem. So you have, say, our 2x2 grid. You have up here conspiracy theories that are true, and you say, yes, I think they're true. So you got a hit, right? Conspiracy theories that are true that are not true, conspiracy theories that are true that you say are not true. So that's a miss. You missed out. That's a type 2 error. Down here, you have conspiracy theories that are not true, and you signal, I think they are true. Okay, that's a type 1 error, a false positive. And then the last one. So what I'm arguing is that it's a costlier error to miss the real conspiracies, because that could harm you, versus identify a conspiracy that isn't actually true. It's not all that harmful to believe these things when they're not true, right? So I'm arguing in our evolutionary history, we evolved this cognition to assume more are true than actually are, just in case.
Okay, so the conventional wisdom about people who believe conspiracy theories is that uncertainty is so cognitively unmanageable that the brain does something as almost like an organizational principle or soothing mechanism by creating a conspiracy theory or lending one to believe in those things. So is that too reductive, or
no? I don't think it's too reductive. I think that's true because that's true for everything. We just assume we can understand causality in the world. We're not omniscient, so I'm going to be flawed in my ability to determine whether the pattern is real or not. So better to err on the side of just assuming most patterns are real. The rustle in the grass is probably a dangerous predator. Even if it's just the wind, that's not a particularly costly error to make. Again, that's one of our false positives errors, right? So in small groups, there are coalitions of people that are talking about you behind your back. They're plotting to get the raise before you do, or groups are plotting against each other. This is very normal. Anthropologists have a lot of research on this, and so it pays to be a little cautious about other people, especially if you don't really know them, especially if they have more power than you, or at least you think they have more power, right?
So have conspiracy theories gotten more elaborate over time?
Yeah, so this is a hard one to answer because the social science survey data is pretty new, just in the last few decades. Conspiracy theories was always treated since about the 1950s as a real fringe, tinfoil hat, wackadoodle, weirdo kind of belief. Doesn't belong in mainstream academia. Journalists weren't covering it in any depth, and so on. And until recently, it became apparent, this is kind of serious. The guy in the White House thinks this stuff is true, right? So maybe this is not a fringe thing. And it didn't used to be that way. Before the 1950s, conspiracism was pretty mainstream. You cited Usinsky and Parents. They did that massive study of letters to the editor of the New York Times over a century. And you go back to the 1890s, there were just tons of letters about what the Mormons were doing, what the Jews were doing, what the Catholics were doing, the outsiders versus the insiders. And this was pretty common, normal knowledge for citizens to have about things that were going on. It was not considered fringe.
But were people acting on those conspiracy theories? Like, have they become more dangerous? What were the net effects of people believing this stuff back in the day?
I think, yes, it was dangerous. Well, most anti-Semitism throughout history is based on a conspiracy theory. Those Jews are up to no good. They're seeding the wells with plague disease, and they're manipulating the economy and banking. And they're running the media, and they're doing this, they're doing that. The stab in the back conspiracy theory in the 1920s that explained why Germany lost the First World War was picked up by Hitler and the Nazis to perpetrate anti-Semitism that way. That goes back to an earlier blood libel conspiracy theory about the Jews, sacrificing Christian children to drink their blood. And what I call the witch theory of causality, that a witch is an explanation for why bad things happen. Plagues and diseases and accidents and storms and starvation and so on. The cause of that is women cavorting with demons in the middle of the night. That's a conspiracy theory. and people acted on that. That's what a witch craze is.
How much does YouTube and social media have to do with the way conspiracy theories are sort of metabolized now? Like, if it weren't for the rise of all that stuff, do you think people would have sort of become smart enough to avoid them? Or is this just part of being human?
Yes, the internet is going to liberate us all. Everybody could be their own fact checkers.
I'm trying to figure out how much to blame the internet and
Well,
YouTube.
I would say it carries some of the blame for the speed of transmission of conspiracy theories and the size of the audience you can garner overnight. I mean, you track the history of JFK assassination conspiracy theorists. I mean, the 60s and 70s, they were mostly meeting in these tiny little hotel conference rooms with their little mimeograph newsletters. You reach a few hundred people, a couple self-published books. Not a big thing, right? Now, like Loose Change was the first digital viral video. It's seen by like 10 million people in the first couple of months. You know, the numbers Hollywood producers would kill for. This was the 9/11 Truther film, and that's different.
Yeah, so I remember when Loose Change came out. What was it like?
Was that
2004,
3, something?
Okay, yeah, it was a few years. It wasn't right away.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm thinking back right after 9/11. I remember seeing viral images going around. Like there was that one where it was like Nosferatu was in the clouds, was in the big smoke cloud, that kind of thing.
Right.
But like, how long did it take the current conspiracy theories around 9/11 to sort of take hold? Did Loose Change actually start it?
No, it didn't start. It accelerated. The first book was in French, The Big Lie, and that was 2002, I think. So we're talking September 2001. It was like March of 2002 when the first book started coming out, that it was an inside job. Okay. Then it really accelerated pretty fast after that. The birther, that Obama wasn't born on U.S. soil, apparently forgetting that Hawaii is part of the United States. Anyway, that took off pretty fast, and of course, you know who was trumpeting that, if you will, on CNN. Remember that when he was on there with Anderson Cooper? Oh, Anderson, we have people in Hawaii. You're not going to believe what they found. And so you get instant, overnight coverage.
Right. So there, after Loose Change, then there was a documentary released where that actually went through Loose Change, sort of almost frame by frame, explaining what was wrong. So can you break that down at all? Like,
yeah.
I guess okay, let's put it this way. How do you talk somebody out of that particular 9/11 conspiracy theory?
That's a hard one because here they do what we call anomaly chasing. So you just go look, searching for something that anomalous that doesn't appear to be explained by the mainstream theory, and then that becomes the new theory. And so you knock that one down. These are like unsinkable rubber ducks. You push this one, another one pops up, and they have and people that are steeped down the rabbit hole of these conspiracy theories. They have hundreds of these, like the JFK assassination thing. I read Vincent Bugliosi's 1,400-page book in which he addresses probably not even all, but like 400 different conspiracy theories about JFK alone. And then you got to keep that in your head, like with Rogan on Tuesday. He's got this one little thing, Shermer. If you can't explain this one little thing about the bullet and it turned right and left, and then it should have been, if I don't know that, then he's like, gotcha, right? And there could be hundreds like that. So this is part of the problem. So what I try to do is go for what is it that really bothers this person? It's like talking to climate deniers, right? Before you know it, 5 minutes in, you're talking about free market capitalism. It's like, wait, what has that got to do with climate? So this is what they're really after, right? Or you talk to somebody, a Christian creationist about, a Christian conservative about evolution, and all of a sudden you're talking about morals and the values of American. It's like, what has that got to do with the biology? Nothing. But it's this deeper thing that they're concerned about. So usually with conspiracy theories, there's something underlying it. So in the case of 9/11, there's concerns about American foreign policy, our oil policy. What are we doing in the Middle East? And this is what bothers me about these, like the truther. They're missing the bigger story. What was the relationship of the U.S. government with the Saudi government? Where did the money come from to fund those guys? Why aren't we tracking that? How did those Saudi leaders, the family, get out of America on 9/12? How did that happen? Why did that happen? So to me, these other conspiracies are distracting us from, if you want to call it a conspiracy, but something else.
But why is that? Because it's just not as sexy a narrative?
Yes, I think so. I think it's not as entertaining. It's not as sexy. I don't know. Because it's more like boring regular politics. Because we know politicians lie and dissemble, and they do shady things behind closed doors that we don't know about until we find out through Freedom of Information Act things and government committees. So let me just rattle off a few of those. The CIA, MK Ultra. The CIA had a program of mind control, brainwashing, because there was a fear that there was a gap with the Russians and the Chinese and the North Koreans, that we were falling behind the brainwashing gap, right? So the CIA was dosing U.S. citizens with LSD and other mind-altering drugs without their knowledge, without their consent. Congress didn't even know about it. And then Operation COINTELPRO. The FBI was seeding agents inside these social movements. The Black Panthers, the American Indian Movement, some feminist groups, a bunch of others, with agents that would pretend to be members of these groups. Apparently, there were some of these gatherings where there were more FBI agents than there were actual members of the group, right? And all the way up to blackmailing Martin Luther King Jr. They taped his sex in hotel rooms to blackmail him and sent him that letter. I remember that letter, and then it turns out that was written by the FBI, sent to him by the FBI to blackmail him. Our government is doing this.
I mean, that's good stuff.
It's
Why is
real.
that not enough?
That's real.
Exactly.
I know.
Is that not enough?
It should be enough. I mean, it's got sex.
I mean, so one of the things that I hear often when I have conversations with people about this idea that it's a test. The government or whatever this, whoever they are testing the American people to see how compliant we will be. So something like the pandemic, that this whole thing, so somebody will say this whole thing was engineered to see how, if we will follow orders, if we will behave. Because, I mean, I guess Bill Gates has something to do with this. I don't have all the details of this, but this is somehow, they're gonna see how far we'll go going along with it, and then something even bigger will happen, and that will enable them to completely control us.
Yeah, that's one of them. Yeah, there's a whole bunch related to the pandemic. So here's the underlying principle is the principle of proportionality. That is, we have a big cause, a big effect, a pandemic or a famous person dies, and we want the cause of that effect to be equal in size, right? So if I take, interesting, so if I take a little pebble and toss it, it doesn't take much effort, right? If I have a fist-sized stone, I got to kind of heave it with more effort. If I have a boulder, I got to really throw everything into it to get it out there, right? So the cause and effect are kind of in a Newtonian way a match. So and then psychologically, our folk physics graphs onto our folk psychology. If you ask subjects, actual experiments, to take 2 die and try to roll a low number, and you'll see them kind of like gently, like just sort of like that. If you could try to roll 11 or 12, they'll take it and really heave it against the wall, as if somehow that's going to make a difference. Of course, it doesn't. So then you apply to conspiracy theories, right? So take the Holocaust, one of the worst things that ever happened in human history. The cause of that, one of the worst political regimes in human history, the Nazis, okay? So JFK assassinated by who? Lee Harvey Oswald, some lone nut? That just doesn't feel right, cause and effect. So you got to add in the FBI and the CIA and the KGB and the Mafia and the Cubans and the Russians and, kind of make it match. Princess Diana, cause of death, drunk driving, speeding, no seatbelt. But princesses are not supposed to die.
That is boring. Let's face it.
That's boring. Yeah. Come on, it's got to be MI6 and the Royal.
Right.
So we look for 9/11. You telling me 19 guys with box cutters brought down the World Trade Center building? Come on, Shermer, you can't be serious.
Okay, but with the pandemic, I'm curious just how you think about this. Like, as putting aside like what you talk about with respect to conspiracies, how they manifest in our brains, all of that. Admittedly, it's really confusing. Everything with the vaccines, everything with the way the information was disseminated, it was extremely confusing. Whether or not it was confusing on purpose is debatable. Personally, I think it was just like a whole bunch of things. But even I, who am a very skeptical person, I think we're pretty much aligned there. I have a hard time not thinking that there's some fishy business going on.
Well, so we were just talking on the drive over here about the lab leak hypothesis.
Yes,
one of
my favorite subjects.
I mean, when it first came out, it was like that was a real hypothesis, and then all of a sudden it was silenced. That's a crazy conspiracy theory.
Yeah, right? I think there was about 3 weeks when you were allowed to talk about the lab leak, right?
And then it wasn't until, of all things, was it Jon Stewart that kind of triggered it off on one of those night shows that said?
Well, I think it was I think it was starting to come back. Where are we? This is the end of October. I feel like we've been allowed. This is in the summer. I feel like people started creeping back into it.
Yeah, and the way you said allowed to talk about it, I mean, it's just so weird that we have this media landscape where you're allowed or not allowed to talk about things like that. So I think, the general problem here is when there's great uncertainty, we just have no idea what it's going to be, right? So you're talking January, February, March of 2020, no one knew if the death rate from SARS-CoV-2 was going to be like the flu or if it was going to be like Ebola. Or just remember, people forget this, AIDS. The death rate from AIDS was 100%. Until the drug cocktail. 100%. So imagine you're the head of the CDC, or you're Anthony Fauci, you're some politician, mayor, governor of a state, whatever. And there you are, press conference, microphone in your face. What do we do? Do we close down the economy? Should we shut the schools down? No more restaurants? Do we mask everybody? So it's a signal detection problem, right? So you're back to type 1, type 2 errors. If you make the wrong error, you assume business as usual, it's not going to be that bad, and turns out it's 50% fatality is like the plague, then that's on you, right? So better to err on the side, it's probably going to be terrible, and if it's not, lucky us. So I think that's what was happening.
Isn't that also, but they're really underestimating the intelligence of the people, or the ability for people to walk and chew gum at the same time. To say that you don't need masks, that masks will not prevent transmission, when they knew that they needed to save the masks for the first responders. I mean, I think that kind of, if that's your opening gambit, there's no way to retain the trust of the people.
And that fuels conspiracism for sure.
It was doomed from the beginning. Yeah,
that's a problem. Yeah, better to be transparent and honest. Just come right out and say, well, no one actually knows. And, you can just couch it in a signal detector. Look, I'm just going to do the best I can. Here's what we think now. We might be wrong. Be a good Bayesian. Here's our probabilities. I'll update my priors if the new information comes in. And then the next press conference, hey, we found out something new. Rather than the way it's presented is like, well, now this is the truth. And then, well, but you said something different last time. So it looks like you're lying.
Right. I mean, and also with the lab leak, we were talking about this before, I don't think any reasonable person thinks that it was done on purpose, that this was some kind of bioweapons attack. But it seems to me that the chances of an accident, it's now being, Vanity Fair and ProPublica just dropped a really big story with newly emerged, pretty compelling evidence that I think they were calling it a research-related accident. Okay.
That's funny. Yeah, right. Well, so that's what fuels conspiracism, right? Where there's great uncertainty, there's lack of transparency, and you can say the Chinese government's not the most transparent political regime.
Right.
Well, and that just makes it worse.
Okay, so you, Michael Shermer, when the pandemic was starting and you were following the news and watching Fauci on TV, what were you thinking personally?
I was thinking pretty much what I was just saying. Like, these guys really don't know. Nobody knows. And that was the problem. And, I tend to try to err on the side of giving people the benefit of the doubt of their motives. I never got the impression Anthony Fauci wants to control the American public and take away our freedoms, right? I don't think Bill Gates wants to chip everybody, so they can track us. In any case, it's already happening, because if you have a cell phone, they're tracking you, so it's too late.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You missed that one.
That's right.
That is a kind of a conspiracy, although it's sort of open conspiracy, I guess.
Yeah.
Although it's not clear. Apparently, I'm trying to find the answer to this question. If you turn your phone off and you drive somewhere, do they know where you are? And some people have told me they do, that it's still pinging.
Well, if you say something in conversation, a word, or you mention a product or a place or a name, it will pop up in your suggested in your feed. I mean, I'm not kidding. How many people have experienced this? You think your phone is off, you're having a conversation with somebody, and suddenly you get a marketing email about this thing.
Interesting.
Not crazy.
Interesting. I did not know that. Okay, there's a new conspiracy theory.
Yeah. Okay, so I was doing a retreat with about 15 people who consider themselves politically homeless. This is something that I've started recently, and these were all women. They were mostly, not all, but mostly liberals who had just are starting to grow wary with the extreme ends of the political left. And these were people who have started listening to a lot of podcasts, like yours and like mine, and very reasonable, not hysterical, intelligent, sober-minded. And one of the things that came up again and again was this idea that we're being played. I mean, I don't think the term global elites entered into the discussion per se, but this idea that there are people pulling the strings at a very, very high level. It may not be Anthony Fauci that wants to control the American people, that is somebody in his ear who's being manipulated by somebody even higher up, and this notion that the head of the World Bank and others are meeting on islands to talk about things.
Yeah.
How far off is that?
Okay, probably not that far off. Let's carry this through and think about it for a minute. So in 9/11 truthism, there's two phrases, lie hop and my hop. Lie hop is let it happen on purpose. Bush knew that Kennedy was going to do this, and he let it happen on purpose as a pretext to invading Iraq. Or worse, made it happen on purpose. He's actually in on it, and Bush operatives somehow got into the World Trade Center buildings and knocked through all that drywall and planted those explosive devices without anyone noticing. Okay, I mean, it just goes on. It's just completely crazy. In fact, I introduced in the book cow hop, capitalized on what happened on purpose, right? This is what politicians do. Oh, this bad thing happened. Okay, we got to raise the budget. We got to invade this country. We got to do these things. After Pearl Harbor, there were lie hop and my hop. They didn't call them that, but that Roosevelt knew the Japanese were going to attack in Hawaii, and he let it happen on purpose as a pretext to getting America into the war because he wanted to support Great Britain. Churchill was begging him to come into the war. He couldn't do it. Congress didn't want to vote on it. The American Firsters, led by Charles Lindbergh, were against this. Stay out of those crazy entanglements in Europe, and so on. And he needed some pretext. Pearl Harbor happens. Boom. Okay, now here's our capitalize on what happened on purpose, right? That's what politicians really do. And that should be our focus, right? Because that is a kind of a conspiracy in a way that really happens.
But something, we're going to go to Q&A in 1 second, but something like Jeffrey Epstein. Okay, so if we're talking about people meeting in secret and, a kind of almost like multi-level marketing scheme of control, and then we have somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, totally mysterious source, it's totally mysterious where his wealth came from, then he's in prison, then he dies. Like, what do you, I guess, did he kill himself or not, Michael?
Yeah. So when it first broke, I went, no, he just committed suicide. And then it's like, well, one camera was out. It's like, that's a little suspicious. 2 cameras were out. Okay. It's like, if you hear a knock on the door, you hear like what was that? Or and then, oh, is that somebody at the door? That's somebody at the door, right? So it was 2 signals. And so I posted on Twitter, okay, I think this could be an actual conspiracy theory where somebody, killed him. And then somebody emailed me that used to work at that prison, Rikers prison there. They said, oh, that place is a dump. Nothing works. The cameras don't work. The electricity goes out. It's a dump.
He's really in the most rickety, nothing works prison.
It's hard to believe. Yeah, it's hard to believe that that's the case. Well, I mean, why do people commit suicide? Well, when they hit the end, and he did. That's one motive, not just depression, but also when if you're a con man and you've been found out, ultimately that may be the end. No one knows for sure, of course. So here's what happens. We spin a narrative that makes sense. Well, he's got a list of all those famous rich people that were on that island. And we know Clinton and whoever else was there and so on and so forth. And somebody would have had the motive to kill him. But same thing with Kennedy. Who wanted to kill Kennedy? Well, the military-industrial complex, the CIA and Johnson and the Cubans, and Castro hated him, and on and on. Yeah, but you could say that about every American president. Think of how many people hated Nixon or Trump or Obama. And they didn't assassinate them. Nixon got us out of Vietnam. Why wasn't he assassinated by the military-industrial complex, right? So the counterfactual makes us rethink those.
All right. Okay, well, we're going to go to audience questions. I purposely didn't grill you about too many specific conspiracy theories.
Give me one more.
Oh, more?
One more.
Okay. Sorry. Are we at
Stop the conspiracy
one
theories.
more? Okay. Well. Oh yeah. You ready? Yes. Oh no. We're still gonna go. Sorry. Okay. Well, actually, let me ask you. What conspiracy theory do you believe?
Well, the ones that actually have evidence for them. That there's actually a paper trail. So the Pentagon Papers or the WikiLeaks, revealed here's millions of documents showing exactly what these politicians were saying behind our backs without Congress knowing and so on. The Pentagon Papers, they were lying about the Vietnam War. Here are public comments by McNamara about how it's going, and then here's what he said like an hour later to Nixon. And he said, we're losing. It's terrible. It's we got to get out. It's like they're just lying. Now, but that's not a surprise. We know politicians lie, right? So my other example is the Volkswagen cheating the emission standards in Europe. why would they do that? Oh, I don't know, to make more money? You know, I mean, this. Come on, it's not a shocker, right? Okay. We know people do this.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. So, but here's a 9/11 conspiracy theory that I believe. I don't believe the narrative around Flight 93. Okay. The whole let's roll thing, I think that was engineered. So Flight 93 is the one that was in Pennsylvania, the one that crashed in Pennsylvania. So the conspiracy theory is that was shot down by our planes because it was headed into it was going to crash into something else. Right. Okay. Whether or not that's true, I feel like that could be true. Whether or not that's true, the whole idea that everybody, overthrew the hijackers and crashed it into the ground in order to be patriots and keep the plane from going somewhere else, and they said, let's roll. The guy said, let's roll, and they all convened. Yeah, that seems not. No.
I think I would agree with you. It is a story. It's kind of a salvaging a horrible thing that happened with a feel-good story. And that does kind of fit a certain narrative. These are the equivalent of our brave soldiers fighting back against these terrorists. I mean, there's no recording of this let's roll, right? There's just, this was ear witness.
No, and I mean, George W. Bush made it a mantra. It was a meme, practically.
Yeah, that could be. That's right. That could be. There was a story about that, like in Columbine, where they asked one of the female students, something about, is she a Christian? And, she said, I would die for my Lord or something, and then he shot her. And it was like, come on. I mean, it was just sort of one of these, we got to salvage something out of this horrible tragedy.
Okay. All right. Are we, is it time? Yes, you want to go? Okay, we're going to open it up to your questions now. I cannot wait. Okay, she's going to come around with
your first question is over to your right.
All right.
Yes, I wonder if you would talk a little bit about the psychology behind people who believe in things that obviously aren't true. There's a psychological concept called cognitive dissonance, that as we try to make sense of our world, we build ideas based around our own values and our experiences, but then cognitive dissonance takes over and we believe things that obviously aren't true. Could you talk more about the psychological background behind these people that believe these things that just clearly aren't true?
Yeah. So I have a discussion of this in the book. This was discovered by Leon Festinger in December of 1954, in which he joined a end-of-the-world UFO cult at the top of a mountain, not far from here, actually, outside of Chicago, where this woman was getting, through channeling from the aliens, that the world was going to come to an end. So he thought, Leon Festinger was a young psychology professor, well, this will be interesting. I'll join the group and see what happens when the world doesn't come to an end, hopefully. And of course it didn't. And midnight comes around and they're like looking up at the sky and they're checking their watches. What time have you got? Oh, it's 12:05. Oh no. Well, maybe it was Eastern Standard. Maybe it was Western Standard Time. And then, and then they kind of spin doctored it. Oh well, maybe we miscalculated. It's tomorrow night. Actually it was December 21st. The winter solstice, which is always a good time for the end of the world, but then he wondered what would they do like tomorrow and the next day, next week, or whatever. Would they go back and go, well, that was a dumb idea. Can I have my car back and my job back? Because they gave up everything, right? And no, they went back and doubled down on their belief. So he called that cognitive dissonance. So the dissonance created, but you have a strong belief and the facts are countering it. So what do? You either change your belief or you spin doctor the facts to make them fit the belief. And that's usually what happens. It takes a lot to change a fundamental belief. Very hard to do. And so most conspiracy theories are like this. If you're really committed to it, if it's really important to you for it to be true, because it's some part of your identity, your moral or political or religious identity is built into the conspiracy theory, there are almost no facts that are going to change your mind. It's very difficult to do that.
Question over here. That's a perfect lead into my question. To follow up on this question of comparison between cults and conspiracy theorists, what do we do? How do we pull people back or out of this path that they're in?
Well, first of all, as I like to say, no one in the history of the world has ever joined a cult. They join a group that they think is going to be good and helpful and save the world. And if you look at the history of Jim Jones, the guy ended the Jonestown disaster, he was a real, what we would call a social justice warrior today. He was a progressive, living in the Bay Area, working with Jerry Brown. His first time he was governor, manning the soup kitchens, helping poor people. He had one of the earliest integrated racially integrated churches in California. I mean, it's people joined that group because this is a good thing, and it was a good thing, right? And then 15 years later, you're drinking the Kool-Aid, and so nobody thinks they're going to do that. No one thinks that what they believe is a crazy conspiracy theory. They think it's an actual conspiracy that I have discovered, and this is important, and I am in on this secret knowledge, and it's incredible that I get to know this, and I'm going to do something about it. And so you can't just counter it with, okay, this is all a bunch of baloney, and here's why, because that's not going to do it. You have to kind of do an end run around it and try to bore down, well, what is it is really concerning you here? And how did you, then you just ask a lot of questions. How do you know that's true? Where did you hear that? What's the source of those facts? Did anybody fact check that? Is it confirmed by other sources? Basic journalism stuff, right? You kind of try to follow up on that, and they may not change their mind at that moment. Almost never. You just kind of plant that seed, and maybe they go away and think about it a little bit, and then they'll likely never talk. If they change their mind, they'll likely just not bring it up again. They probably won't say, thanks to you, I changed my mind, right? That almost never happens.
Your next question is up in the front here.
Yes, does level of education indicate a likelihood of someone believing in conspiracy theories?
It attenuates it a little bit. If you don't have a high school diploma, you're like 40% believe in most conspiracy theories. If you have a postgraduate degree, it's about 22%. But that 1 in 5 Americans with a postgraduate degree believe in a lot of these conspiracy theories, it's not that big of an effect. And in a way, it makes sense because smart, educated people are better at rationalizing beliefs that they hold for non-smart reasons. That is, for other reasons, emotional, political, religious. This is my religious truth. This is my political truth. And the smarter you are, the better you're going to be able to, it's called motivated reasoning, confirmation bias, and so on. You can just employ that even better.
Yeah, I actually was going to ask you, is it kind of like the horseshoe theory?
Yes,
You've got the least educated people and the highest educated people are the most susceptible to this. And exactly. I wonder, too, if the highest educated people are just so used to believing their own hype, sort of trusting themselves, thinking whatever they think must be correct because they're educated and they're smarter.
Well, we know that, again, back to the tinfoil hat wackadoodles, the people that stormed the Capitol on January 6th, these were not those people. These are people that married, family, jobs, careers, military, lawyers, doctors, regular people. I mean, just... They keep gas in the tank. They pay off their bills. I mean, they're leading normal lives, and they have this one thing because they believe it's true.
Next question.
Next question's in here in the center.
What's your thought on social media banning publication of conspiracy theories? Like Twitter and Facebook will take posts down that it seems to me those would make. That's like it's conspiracy theory supporter if you can't say your theory. But
I tend to be against that. I'm pretty hardcore free speech fundamentalist almost. I mean, libel, slander, posting the nuclear codes, you can't do these sorts of things. But I tend to err on the side of let people have their say and then let people like me debunk them. And just, I have more faith in the media that American public people can actually reason their way to things and you show them the fact. I'm tend to disinclined to put it in the hands of a committee to decide what I can and can't read, right? So like my friend Joe Rogan was hammered for having Robert Malone on his show talking about myocarditis and vaccines, okay? He appears to be wrong. But why should some guy at Twitter tell me what I can read and not read about myocarditis and vaccines? I know what Joe Rogan's show is like. It's not 60 minutes. I know he's just bullshitting with people for a couple hours, and I know what to expect, and I can look up on Wikipedia or whoever, Robert Malone, what is the counter to that? And you find it within seconds. Oh, there's the argument against the vaccine myocarditis connection. Okay. So I said, just let people have their say. So I'm glad Elon bought Twitter. Oh, Okay. Maybe that's not going to go over well here.
Next question in the center.
Yes, just to piggyback on the education factor, I was wondering if age also plays into who believes conspiracies more.
Yeah, okay, let's go through these. So, like political orientation, race, and so on. These are proxies for predictors of specific conspiracy theories, not overall conspiracism. So, blacks are more likely to believe that the CIA planted crack cocaine in inner cities or invented AIDS to decimate black populations. White Americans are more likely to think the government is building FEMA camps to imprison Americans that own guns, or the government's trying to cancel the Second Amendment, and so on. Age. Education, political orientation. So these are just kind of direct people toward different specific ones that match the narrative of their position. But overall, polls show that everybody ticks the box for at least one conspiracy theory. And for good reason, because some of them are true, right? They're not all completely crazy. Even the crazy ones have some element of truth to them. You know, Sandy Hook was a false flag operation, okay, completely crazy. But the U.S. government has conducted false flag operations in our history, a lot of them. If you look at the history of the CIA was very much involved in false flag operations in South American countries to manipulate elections to favor the fascist dictators over the communist dictators because they'd be friendlier to American business interests. Our government was doing that, okay? And Operation Northwoods was a document. We have the document from top aides in Kennedy's administration, presented to him and Robert McNamara, that we are going to shoot down an American commercial airliner filled with Americans and blame it on the Russians so we can invade Cuba. And there was a bunch like this. We're going to do this in Miami. We're going to do that. We're going to blow up so on and so on. To their credit, Kennedy and McNamara said, we're not doing that. We can't do that. But the top government officials are going, we need a reason to invade Cuba after the Bay of Pigs disaster. I mean, a real invasion where we just go in there with everything. And we assassinate. There was dozens of attempts to assassinate Castro by the CIA, including in cahoots with the mafia. So enough of that is true that people go, yeah, maybe that Alex Jones isn't completely crazy.
Next question's way in the corner.
Is there anything at all that we could possibly do in the course of the educational system in the United States to try and teach children, high school, even college for that matter, how to ask the kind of questions when something like that comes up? How do you prevent yourself from falling into this trap, but then still allow for the fact, well, all right, there were some of these things that were being done, just to get at the accuracy of what you hear or read?
Yeah, I think this is the core of the problem. I think it's not really taught in lower grades. I would propose we teach, like the course I teach at Chapman University in Southern California is Skepticism 101, how to think like a scientist. This isn't rocket science. It's not, you don't need college kids. I could teach this to middle school kids. And so they take algebra, I remember I took geometry, algebra, pre-algebra, algebra, pre-calculus, and so on. Why do I need all that? Unless you're going into a STEM field, how about a course in how to think, period? And, not couched in that heavy-duty philosophical logic, if P, then Q, if not P, then not Q, and all of a sudden the eyes are kind of glazing over. But, couch it in real-world examples. Like, how do you know if UAPs are real or not, these UFOs? All right, let's just use fun examples like that, how to reason about those sorts of things. And it's supposedly taught under critical thinking rubrics, but I don't really see it. People graduate, they have no idea how to think about these things. I get them at 18, my students are 18, they're right out of high school. They have no idea, their brains are mush. And they're just like an eye-opener, like, oh my God, I never thought about it, yeah. So that would be a good start, educational reform.
Yeah, I was going to say, we talk about critical thinking all the time, but that can go both ways. You can say people who believe in crazy conspiracy theories say they are critically thinking. They're just asking questions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we call it, it's called jacking off, JAQ, just asking questions. Okay.
But it's really hard because you do have to ask questions.
Yes.
It's maddening because these very notions have been weaponized. One must ask questions in order to prevent exactly what you're talking about.
You tell me something because you're a journalist. I have found in my experience, journalists are really good at critical thinking. In fact, they are hardcore skeptics. I find them more. Is it because you've heard so much bullshit that from people in interviews that I'm going to start off being skeptical?
Well, oh God, I mean, this is a whole other topic. I think journalists are less and less that way. I mean, we have this whole phenomenon of activist journalism where there's an adherence, there's looking for, there's a sort of confirmation bias approach to reporting. But yeah, I mean, of course, you're supposed to be skeptical. In order to, always say, like, a good editor will say, we decide to do a story if we have looked at all the reasons that we shouldn't do the story. Ask yourself, every single question, is there any reason I shouldn't do the story? Try to talk yourself out of doing the story, and if you can't talk yourself out of it, then you should do it. But
yeah, that's good, right.
Okay.
We have time for one more question. It's going to be right up in the front here.
What about the tendency to act on conspiracy theories, do dangerous acts? You touched on this a little bit when you talked about Pizzagate, and certainly when you talked about the big lie, I'll call it. Are there any studies around the notion of people actually acting on conspiracy theories they believe in and causing harm to others?
Most people don't act on it. Again, I mentioned Edgar Welch because we know who the guy is. He's the only guy that did anything about the Pizzagate thing. Other people just went on Yelp and left a bad review for the dough was too doughy in the pizza. It's like, it's not exactly what you do if you thought there was a pedophile ring going on, right? This is why I think they didn't really believe it in the same way they believe other things. All right, it's a proxy belief. It's a stand-in for something else that you don't trust the Democrats, you don't trust government agents, something like that. But the fact that some people do, and of course we're concerned about 2024, what's going to happen if no one accepts the outcome of the election on either side, regardless of what happens, then what? I mean, so people are talking about civil war. I can't imagine what that would look like. It's not like armies are going to line up like they did, in 1861, but something, political violence, people with hammers and whatever, there could be more of that, acting on it. I mean, we have an evolved moral sense of justice and right and wrong, and people get very agitated and act on that. We know for sure. I mean, if you look at the study of homicides, it's like 90% of them are moralistic in nature, we're told by people who study this. That is, it's not instrumental. I killed him because I wanted his Rolex watch or took his car. It's that, he dissed me in front of my friends. He slept with my girlfriend. He insulted me. He did this. He deserved it, right? There's studies on killers in prison. And to a man, and they're almost all men, the other guy had it coming, and here's why. And they have a list of grievances against the person they killed, right? That's moralistic sense of justice. So, but it's skewed, but it's not like, so they do act on it. That can be a problem.
All right. Is that it? And no more? Oh, sorry, that was the end? No more? Okay, all right. Well, let me ask you one last question. Or do you have something? No. Are you hopeful for people's critical thinking abilities to reason? Are we getting worse at this or better?
On the long time scale, I'm very hopeful. If you look back at, let's say, the last 500 years, 500 years ago, everybody believed in witches and demons and all these the Jews were doing this and the Catholics were doing that. I mean, this was common knowledge. And no one knew how to tell if it was true or not, because there was no such thing as a rationality community, a scientific community, empirical ways of testing hypotheses. That's all fairly recent, right? Even like statistical analysis of big data sets, that's just in the last few decades that we've figured out how to do that properly. So that's pretty new.
That's true. So it's not as hopeless and chaotic as it may seem. Yeah. No, I think that's a good, I think you're right.
I even have hope for social media, although
yeah.
it can
all
be a
right.
problem.
Well, watch out for those chemtrails in the meantime. Something new to think about. Well, Michael.
Saw some this morning.
Yes. All right. Well, Michael, thanks. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
And,
thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you all.
I appreciate that. Thank you.